So next joining us is a researcher, Aljoscha Burchardt. I have to read this. He is the Deputy Site Director for the German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence here in Berlin. And he is an expert in language and artificial intelligence, so perfect host for this discussion. And the second one is Mario Brandenburg. He's a member of the German Parliament, the Deutsche Bundestag, from the Free Liberal Party, Democratic Party, so FDP. And I also have to read this. He is the policy spokesman for the parliamentary group of the Free Democrats in the German Bundestag and a member of the Committee of Education, Research and Technology Assessment, as well as spokesman to the Committee of Digital Agenda and Study Commission for Artificial Intelligence. So those two will discuss today this very interesting topic, if Germany can actually make AI. So are we just a paper tiger, as I think the literal translation is, Papiertiger aiming for the moon, or are we actually capable of doing this? So this is a bit of a controversy maybe. If you have questions as the audience, please use the chat and ask those questions. I can then later on give them to our two guests. But now I would like to welcome Aljoscha and Mario, and please cheer at home and clap for them for our discussion. Hello.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Fine. Aljoscha, you want to start basically? Go ahead.
Yeah, we are fine. So first of all, we didn't know whether we will have a moderator or whether we'll just be talking to each other. So we said it's a little bit of a surprise, but I mean, we could start maybe with a home story and tell how we got to know each other, Mario and me.
That makes my job easier. Else, I have some questions for you, whatever you like.
Yeah, you have some questions, but let me go ahead, because it's fun, I guess. So I think 2.5 or even 3 years ago, DFKI, the former head of DFKI, Wolfgang Walster, got an invitation from Christian Lindner, head of the German Liberal Party, to join a brown bag lunch and discuss about this new hot topic, this trend of AI, right? And then, but unfortunately, Wolfgang Walster couldn't make the appointment for some scheduling conflicts. And then, so he went to me and he said, "Oh, do you want to talk to Christian Lindner about AI?" And I said, "Oosh, yes, yeah, okay, of course. If you think I can do it, then I also think I can do it." So, and in this room was Mario. And it was a real nice atmosphere. Christian Lindner in the very beginning says, "I'm the boss, but the other people in this room are the experts." For example, Mario. So whenever you want to talk about content, talk to them. When you need political support, talk to me, like this. I mean, so he was very friendly and inviting. So we talked about AI. And after this meeting, as always, we say, "Oh, yes, let's stay in touch," and so on and so forth. And then we departed. And I said, "Yeah, let's stay in touch." Well, we will hope, no, not hopefully, we will probably never meet again. I mean, like this always happens. But then half a year later, this enquete commission of the German Parliament was founded. And then Mario, and I don't know, Mario, do you remember how it went on then? Did you ask me? Did I ask you?
I actually asked you because Aljoscha was the only one in the room who basically was reading the Live 3.0 from Max Tegmark, and I guess we were reading it to the same time, and he was the only one as well, being a bit of a dreamer and fascinating around what could be and can AI fly to the moon and find new planets and blah blah blah. So basically we got to talk about that topic, and when I was in charge to nominate somebody for the commission, I remembered Aljoscha, and I was fighting very hard to get him in, because I think it's important, and maybe that's a transfer as well to content topic. If a parliament discusses something, normally it's only politicians. Within that enquete commission, it's 50% politicians, 50% let's say real people, but nominated by politicians. And I was fighting super hard to get a researcher in from the field, and the other nominee was somebody from a big tech company, because it's normal that, for example, the Social Democrats would bring in unions, the Christian Democrats would bring in their stuff. So and then I remembered Aljoscha. It was fun basically to work with him. And the good thing is, and I think that's basically the bridge to what we should discuss, it's super hard for politicians or politics in general to have a vision what to do with that stuff. If you're in charge to regulate, it's super hard to find the goal, what to do with it. And basically this is when the researcher comes into play, to bring positive ideas what to do.
And especially when you have to regulate something you don't know. Yeah, so it was inconnu for most politicians. It was the unknown we were talking about in this enquete commission, and that was really for me also. If I can start with the resume of this enquete commission, for me that was one of the nicest thing to see how the knowledgeability of the politicians raised in the first few sessions, right? From having a faint idea what we are talking about when we talk about AI, it became very concrete. For most of them, they got tangible ideas of what we are talking about, and they also very soon understood that we are not in the age of regulation yet. Yeah, but we are in the age of exploration and getting to know this technology, and so we must not stop it in the very beginning by over-regulating it. I think that everybody understood very soon. I mean, some still tried to have red lines and these things in there, but I think they were getting softer and softer.
But Fabian, in his keynote, which I was enjoying very much, said the moment the politicians come in, it becomes unsexy. So basically, since you worked with politicians for 2 years, you're as well causing unsexiness. So what was the point, or would you agree that it becomes unsexy if politicians come in? And if it is, like Fabian said, why is it? I mean, you're the external one with the real world view. I'm infected already.
It really depends on which politicians you talk about. I mean, we had politicians that are especially experts for helping SMEs, for small and medium companies, and they were fighting really hard in the discussions to get good requirements in this in our final report. So, for example, that the small and medium enterprises, that they need certain kinds of help, that they need to get access to data, and so on and so forth. So it really differs. I mean, the politicians are fighting for their constituency, and so no, I don't think it became unsexy. So the funny thing about this digital transformation and AI is that you always have to cooperate with people. You need data. We need data, for example, from the public institutions. We need data from the industry. We need the use cases from them. We need to get KPIs from there. So we cannot do it in our scientific ivory tower. It's no fun. That's the funny thing about AI. It's not really sexy when you don't have questions and when you don't have users, right? So I mean, often enough, users are the enemies. My wife is a designer, of course. Then the customer is the enemy. Yeah, you can do it better without the customer intervening. But in AI, and I wouldn't fully agree with Fabian. It gets more fun when people are using it, when there is data and when there is uptake.
But actually, we are now back at the title. We normally build paper tigers, and you said basically it's fun when there are customers. So you see, I'm becoming a moderator. But what would be your top 3 things which we could achieve basically within that commission from that standpoint, from really execution? So what will help? I mean, knowing that we created the paper tiger, that's part of the reality as well. So there is nothing cool, nothing clickable. It's a PDF. So you see basically how the real goal and the execution is drifting apart. But what would be the top 3 things written down in paper the next government has to do to support basically you or research?
I don't want to make this paper too small, but I was hoping more about the heads, about the people really in this room who are now convinced that something has to happen. They can go out to their parties and they can talk and they can explain what's going on, and then they can point to the paper. And one thing, for example, we put in this paper I find personally really interesting, but it's, I mean, one of hundreds of requirements that we put in there, so that we need APIs for the big platforms, so that researchers, for example, and journalists can study topics like hate speech or like political what do you call it, influencing of people, so that journalists, and that you can now say we need to have these platforms, these APIs. We need to force Facebook and Twitter and so on to give APIs to journalists and to researchers for studying the phenomena. Everybody wanted to talk about hate speech and these things, but we don't know about social bots, and we don't know whether they exist yet. And this was one point where we were very concrete, where we said what needs to happen next, and this will happen. And we also talked about, of course, that we have to find good conditions for research, and good conditions for research doesn't only mean money and professorships and so, but also means kindergartens, and means, I mean, yeah, a second dual career chances and so on. I think this has also been stressed again, and many other things.
But maybe as well to the people in the chat and in the internet. So shoot us some questions. We don't need to talk to each other all the time. But coming back to the APIs. So I mean, there are guys out there running an AI company. So what's your feeling on that? Because that was highly debated. You know, basically to say somebody just open up your data, give us access. And if you remember the discussion, there were parties who said, perfect, that's something the BKA should have. So the BKA, German, basically institution, which I personally would not say these are the ones who need access to the APIs. So it's a fine line, you know, to split up someone's business and say we need access. For you as a researcher, it might be nice, but for a regulator, that's actually a hard shot. And I'm not trying to say Facebook, really not, but actually that's a big thing. And so if somebody is out there thinking about that, Aljoscha gets access to the APIs to see if there are filter bubbles. So just share your feelings with us, because this was actually a mess when we discussed it.
That's absolutely true. I mean, some things that are public that can be crawled in principle. I mean, that we can, information that we can find, but it gets much easier when you do it through an API. I mean, this is undisputable, right? This is no problem. But otherwise, I mean, we discussed this, and this is really an issue. Some people say, yeah, the state could help and could to fund this research. But if you look over the border to Poland or Hungary or the former US president or China, you wouldn't want to give this in the hand of the state. You would rather say there must be a third party, maybe an NGO or somebody that is controlled by the state but not run by the state, needs to get access to this data. And I think and this was another thing that I learned in this democratic process that we had here. We didn't really pinpoint who should have the access in the end. We said we need access, and we said we need to find and debate further good control structures, how this can happen, right? We gave examples of how it could happen, but we through this, as you said, through this very broad political spectrum that was covered there, we all, most of the time we said this needs to be further debated, and we need to find the suitable things. And I wouldn't know how I would prefer it, but I want to have the access to study these things.
But it's another thing which is interesting here. You pointed to Europe, and we all want to have AI made in Europe. And as well, in Fabian's keynote, he said Europe basically needs to live up to it. And I'm fully convinced that this is true. But now you brought it up, because when we were debating internally, not in our commission, but about the Corona app, for example, about central or decentral storage. So if you do centralized storage and European syncing, this means basically your data goes directly to Mr. Orban, which is probably not what you would want for the 80 million of the German population. So it became decentral. Now everybody, for a reason as well, is criticizing it's not integrating nicely. So even if we always push Europe, it's a fine line, because I would not say that whole of Europe we agree. And so that's basically a problem for a digital single market as well. So, and that's, I guess, hopefully something you learned as an external guy, that calling in Europe is theoretically easy, but practically has some downsides as well.
Yeah, and giving technical solutions to societal questions that are open, right? This is another thing. I mean, like we knew it from politics. When it gets hard, then you often get to the legal question, right? About, I mean, homosexual marriage. Then you go to Karlsruhe, and then so the highest court has to decide whether it's possible or not. But in principle, it's a political decision, right? It's not a legal decision, right? But it's easier to turn it into a legal decision. And I've also sometimes had the impression that we turn some societal questions. Do we want to use face recognition in public places? That's a societal question, and then it turns out into a technical questions about the current state of the art. How many false positives, how many false negatives do we have on the current state of the art and technology? Which doesn't matter to me for answering the fundamental question whether we want to have this kind of technology. You could do it the other way around. You could say we want it as soon as we have the following error rate, then we want to use it, right? And then science has to make it work, right? This would be, for me, would be the right way to do it, and not the other way around. Oh, what is the error rate? Can we accept it societally? Let's see. Yeah, what can research offer to me? I think this is an old-fashioned idea of transfer. It doesn't work here.
I need to start laughing, because this brings us back to one other massive discussion without almost any result, or no, with a dispute. Is technology neutral? You remember that one? Because now you argued with your facial recognition that it is neutral. Is it really neutral, or does technology have an agenda? Because the ones who were not in the room, this was debated, I guess, for an hour, and then we stopped the debate without any result. And basically this topic at the end came up, and then there was a voting, and now it's some fiddly text in the report document, because we could not find a solution if technology is neutral. There was really a split in the House. 3 parties more said yes, 3 said no. So what is your final conclusion? Is AI neutral, or does it always have an agenda?
I mean, of course, there is a philosophic fundamental position that says everything that is made by man is not neutral, but human values are in there. Every hammer I produce, every car I produce is loaded with values, right? And then it's no more neutral, but I mean, it has my intention has gone into it. But if we take this away, and if we're a little bit more liberal in the notion of neutrality, it's complex. When you think of the development of an AI system, somebody at some point, maybe for their bachelor thesis, has a new machine learning algorithm. Somebody uses it and turns it into a image recognition algorithm. Maybe years later, puts it on open source. Somebody maybe years later trains it with images to make it recognize, I don't know, animals. And somebody later turns it into an app that can be used to recognize animals. It's a long development process. And the question is, when does it lose neutrality? Yeah, in this long chain of things. I mean, and the person that, for example, turns it into an image recognition doesn't know it will be used for animals. It could also be used for cars or for complex situations. So you don't know. And then often people say, yeah, the computer scientists, they need to swear something, or they need to get an algorithm TÜV. And so you have all kinds of measures that could help, but they don't really help. And at some point in this long chain, it loses its neutrality. It's not, you cannot say it was then or then, but it's complex, and that's the point. And we wanted to make clear that the basic technology and I'm convinced that the basic technology is neutral, right? The other day somebody told me, well, already our way of doing mathematics and statistics is highly influenced, and other, like Japanese people, they have a 3-valued logic maybe. And so I mean, if you question the basic assumptions that we're using, like base statistics or so, then nothing is neutral. But I think that goes a little bit too far. I think we should, if we look from the far end, I would say, yeah, well, in the beginning it's neutral, but as soon as you feed it with data, I would say it's no more neutral. Of course, when you choose data and feed an algorithm, then the values that are hidden in this data are in the model.
So, but
Aljoscha, can I throw in a question?
Yeah, sure,
Because
absolutely.
being an investor looking for returns, I'm getting a bit nervous here, and I don't know about the audience, but so the topic is a bit aiming at, maybe we Germans were slowing things down because we are paper tigers. At the end of the day, people who are using AI, they want to make something out of it. They are creators, right? Why is it actually happening that we have this paper tiger image? What are you guys doing in this commission? Are you trying to prevent those entrepreneurs from doing what they want to do, or what's happening there? What is your motivation? I haven't understood that yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll take that. I mean, you see, that's was a good example of actually what was happening there. So you're coming from the field side. So I was in tech before, and I would say the political side comes from that questions we just had, because if you want to regulate something, if it is neutral, you would end up with another regulation, then it has an agenda. So now I'll stop that, because this will go forever and ever. But to make you understand what the problem is, you cannot just come up with, say, look, we need a fund for startups, whatever, an innovation fund. Then somebody would question, what should it do? Should it help basically science? Should it help commonwealth? Should it change our social system? So the real problem is what I learned in 3 years in politics. Everything has to be attached to some political sense or goal. And this is absolutely not matching to what's going on in the field. And to give you some concrete, basically winning. So while discussing the problems to basically get funding from startups, with all the parties over and over and over, you could see that the current political direction was changing. So the government is now talking about an innovation fund, which should start next year. I think it's 400 million from the government, 600 million free money basically flowing in from you, from investors, from companies. And this is a result that they realized, and they really had to talk to startups with that problem. And now this fund is coming up without being attached to a bigger political meeting. It's just trying to help startups to survive basically the second investment wave or something. So, but this took, I think, I don't know, 3 months to decouple it from political agendas. And that maybe explains where the problem is and why from a field perspective, this looks like we are all doing some esoteric stuff.
And as you said, these political topics, they are there already, right? Then somebody wants to talk about DSGVO and other people want to talk about future of work and this and that. I mean, right? Why do we want to talk about the future of work? Well, why is the problem of the Commission on AI to discuss what happens if just in case AI would kill some jobs? Right. So you could also take it. You said that's not our point here. We want to help the technology get through and get Germany become first in the technology development. And then when it comes and when there is a job loss, then we could start discussing what can we do about it. If it doesn't come, we don't need to discuss it at length, right? And nobody knows, as Fabian says in the beginning, whether it will come. So I think there is also some mismatch. But I think for some people we could help a little bit with their fears, also about killer robots and so. I mean, this is another thing that some people also think that. When you invest in AI, it's like an atomic power or like genetically modified stuff. Yeah, once you have it, you will never get rid of it again. So better not try it. I think that's still in many, many people's heads. And this is also something we have to work on. And there, Mario, you said it already, and you said it at another place. We fell a little bit short in the outside communication, but also because it wasn't the mandate of this study commission, right? But this is something that needs to change the attitude of people in Germany.
But maybe bring our investment moderator in. What would be your expectation in terms of that? So again, I'm really I'm in favor of what the government is doing there, which is absolutely not my job as an opposition. That they learned that they should come up with an easy and flexible investment for. But still, you could see in the next level of, I would say, being open to it, institutional investors are still not planned. So meaning that our pension fund money or something could go in, that instead of investing into concrete or whatever, they could invest in the next generation. Why isn't it? Because still the political, I would say, scare to say we invest some pension money into something which might not be super safe is not there. So it's not yet there. And we could not solve that through the discussions in the commission with AI and some examples, because basically there the political hindering was still too high. So we would need some in business, you would say storytelling from the field to convince the ones who are scared. And if we are honest, that's still not there, because Fabian said before AI was dreaming and now we are in execution. So, but within execution, you need political visions to put money there to basically get it kickstarted. And I guess we are a paper tiger because sometimes we at least we're Germans are not that visionary compared to the Americans. They sell us a pen and they have a slideshow that you think, oh my God, I need to buy it for 400K. And we say it's a pen, it writes, you know, we are too rational. And this comes back to what Fabian said, if politicians come in, it's unsexy. But I'm really trying to change, and I hope that it's changing. And Fabian as well, luckily, said he thinks it might change.
I mean, this is maybe all things. One thing we put in this report is that we said also in the educational sector, we have to be very fast and we have to bring computer science to the high schools and everywhere. I mean, I did my high school diploma in 1994 and I had computer science lessons already back then. And still today, people can do their high school diploma without having ever touched a computer.
But would you agree to bring AI then in, like recognizing the eye tracking and see that you have reading issues? Because that would be the blocker topic. So I'm now the politician. I always tell you why it's not working. So convince me.
If you do it right, I mean, Mario's question is when we put an AI camera in a classroom that, for example, can measure whether the pupil, whether they are attending or whether they fall asleep, right? In China, this happens, right? Do we want to have the same in Germany? And I would say if it's only an immediate feedback to a teacher or say like a university teacher in a classroom with 800 students sitting there, to have a meter that tells you how many people are now sleeping or watching movies on their iPhones, that would help. But if this information leaves the room and goes to their boss or maybe to their lawyers or their parents, and so they can misuse this information against this teacher. I mean, then I wouldn't agree. But it's a question about how it is done and what happens to this data. Yeah, is it just an immediate feedback that will be deleted, or will this data be saved? I mean, the same we have with saving telephone calls and so on. And an old discussion, right, that we have for a long time. You have to make it right. to make it happen. But this is really
You see, but there, so let's come back to the paper tiger thing and how we fixed it, because for that example, it's interesting. So the parents don't want it, which then we would be back to the argumentation why the customers don't want it, and in that end we are not in. But to again give a positive example, which I at least think was helping as well the guys with companies in the field and the researchers. Before, Germany was defining AI excellence clusters by a federal state. So we had, I think, 16 because everybody got one. So that was the political solution. Now we are down to 5. So you basically, as a researcher, you hear there will be more money to attract talents. Even if you lucky you, the DFKI is basically not bounded to the Besserstellungsgebot. So the ones who are not German, there was a law that as an AI researcher at, for example, DFKI, you could not earn more than somebody would earn with a state contract in whatever state office. So, and this was highly blocking talents to come in. So do you think 5 excellence spots in Germany is still realistic, or is it still a political wish compared to the size of Germany? And if you think how many excellence spots, whatever, you can count off in the US or in China?
I mean, if we don't raise the talents, it will be hard to fill the positions. The same we see with these 100, professorships that are floating around. I mean, one of the only KPIs from the German AI strategy, right? And everybody's asking what's happening. I mean, today it was in the newspaper again. I mean, so that we have trouble there. But I think if we build the talents, I mean, why not? Why not go for this number? I'm not for an absolutely centralized one hotspot. I think we can have several of them. That's also what we do at DFKI, and so they can build several topics. For example, we have a DFKI office in Bremen, close to the sea, and they are working on marine technologies. Right, they are closer to the sea. They wouldn't do that in Munich. Yeah, but in Munich, you're closer maybe to car industry, and you can have a hotspot there, or like in the Stuttgart Cyber Valley region, people do that. I think that is okay. If you link it to something sensible, then you can have a little bit of decentralized structure.
Then I would basically stick to the decentralized thing, because I think we are actually missing out on that too much. So Fabian said we will have our own Facebook. Not sure, Fabian, if you listen to that, and I'm not sure if we really need it. And if we would have it, I would hope it's decentral. So maybe talk about, because always we talk about China, central stuff, blah, blah, blah. And there was always the question, can we live up to that? And are they too powerful? So I would just want to say, when it came to car or whatever, electrical engineering and that stuff, we were never bigger or richer than China, but we were just better. So I'm always question if it really is the right way to try to get own Facebooks and stuff, or if we should focus on really just becoming an active network. So maybe you guys on that.
Yeah. I think the big 2B things, they have been eaten, right? I mean, that you have it in the US. They were the first ones, and then in China, of course, you close the market and then you can replicate it once. But we don't want to close the market in Europe and have our own Facebook and what have you, iTunes. So I think we have the B2C. We have the strength in the small and medium enterprises, right? So we have a tax office in Dortmund, and we have a car manufacturer in Stuttgart, and they want to work together. They want to work out some nice new kind of business that they have to. I mean, in this B2C area, where we are not talking about big data.
But Eduard, let me just jump in, because Eduard said it's not about the money, it's about speed and progress. So absolutely, I'm in. So, but then it's about willingness of a society to change. So basically we are back, and I don't want to open up political discussions again. So is our society then hungry enough? Because in the end, I wouldn't say China is, the Chinese people are not that hungry. They are at least forced to be hungry, but are we not hungry enough then?
I think we have a negative attitude towards technology. I mean, since 30, 40 years. So every new wave of technology came with a lot of protest from people, because they thought somebody wants to trick me into something for making profit. I think that's the general attitude we see a lot in Germany, and I think it hasn't changed now. We don't see the positive potential of this technology. Also, when I read the newspapers, I mean, we get these paper clippings, and I've really carefully looked through our 2 years of working on this commission. Does do the messages change? But I think they haven't changed yet. The other day, I talked to a young student about AI platforms that should help students do their university, get the right courses, get some feedback and so on. And they said, oh, that's total control. Now they want to control us. That's a feeling also of young people.
But maybe then to answer Eduard, to give you the positive thing, we were debating a lot to get in the so-called regulatory sandboxes to basically not hold up the ones who won't be faster. And it was basically super tight to even get them in as an official recommendation, because there was scare already. And I found a nice article. They counted the words chance and risk, and it was 2 times more risk than chance in it. And remember how we were fighting. So basically, I hope at least we could bring up these wormholes for the one who wants to go faster. So I'm not thinking that we can at least change the ones that are here. So the next decade might be a bit more eager to do some changes, but it's about bringing in wormholes for unbureaucratic execution. And so they are in, and basically whoever will be the next government must then argue why they are not fully executing, because it was every fraction in that house agreed to have that as a recommendation. And therefore that's what I always explain, because we're running out of time. So in the industry, you would write a moonshot paper. That's just not possible. We were writing something which is pushing from the bottom. So we were basically pushing up the minimum bare limit of innovation, which by itself does not sound fascinating, but in the end it is, because there is everything what you will find in there. There is no logical way to not execute that, because basically it was common sense at the whole parliament. So maybe if we read it the other way around, then it's more refreshing, I would say. So, and we are running.
We are also maybe a little bit the wrong people.
Don't worry, we have 10 more minutes. Yeah,
we are maybe the wrong people to talk to, because you are from a liberal party. I mean, you said let people try it out on the market, yeah, and the good solutions that will survive. And I'm from research. I say, okay, let's test it out. Of course, I mean, do it in a human-centric way. I mean, have the users on board and have the trade unions on board and everybody that is inflicted by this technology, right? And let's make it good and let's make it right. But I know, I mean, everything will be worse when we don't do anything. That's the point. I mean, there's no guarantee that everything remains the same when we don't.
Then let's put it back to you and maybe our moderator as well as investor. So you're happy to join. And I was confused by a big zeros in red looking up my screen. Therefore, I thought we are running out of time. Did then you as researchers or even as investors in company, did you miss out to explain nicely what you're doing? Because I mean, there was the point talking about explainable AI. It came up all the time, but if you really look underneath the hood and all the research project, it's not yet that much. So if I would put myself into a classical political standpoint, so did you miss out to explain what you're doing? I mean, there were AI winters, it was there all the time. So why does nobody understand it then?
My question would be, why do people need to understand it, right? For me, it's the other way around. People should tell me what they need and how I can find out if it's good when I build it, and then I build it, and then they can test it. I don't know that they don't need. No, not everybody needs to. You don't need to understand how the brakes of your car work exactly. It's a lot of high tech in there, but you don't need to know it. You just need to be able to operate them. And for a doctor, for a clinician, it's completely different. When a system gives a recommendation for some medical therapy, then they need to get some sort of explanation, but they need to get the right one, right? And they need to tell us, and that's what we're doing in projects. Then they tell us we would need this and that information to understand whether the machine understood the case and got a good recommendation, right? But this is very particular for certain applications, and you cannot do once and cannot discuss that once and for all. And that is something that we also found, I think everybody understood in this, that we need to differentiate. Yeah, are we talking about mobility? Are we talking about medicine? Are we talking about entertainment? That we need to act differently there. But I mean, as a side remark now, and talking really as a scientist, all this about explainable AI is really a sad thing for me, because I started out in the old days of good old-fashioned symbolic AI. You understood perfectly well what the machines were doing, but they were very simplistic. A robot could lift their arm and could pick a box, but you would understand why they would do it, right? And then came all the machine learning, and the systems started to learn themselves. The performance went up through the ceiling, we know that, but we don't understand how the machines do that. I mean, this is also very disappointing. How can a machine translate text so well when we have no idea how they do it internally, right? I mean, this is really disappointing for us as scientists, because you want to understand how things work. So I would be the first one who would cheer loud if we understood better what the machines are doing inside.
So for an investor, Mario, it's pretty easy, to be honest. Our companies look at things that are working, and as Aljoscha said, so it's really testing and trying, and you're not really asking the question, what are the politicians thinking about this? What is regulation thinking about this? We were actually a bit scared when we heard that there would be something that users could claim like later, that you take their data out of the training of the model and would have to kind of get the model to a state when the user wasn't there, because this is highly complicated. But yep. I'm sitting on boards of 4 B2B companies, so there the topic is a bit different. So it's not like with end consumers, it's in a B2B context. So still GDPR is very important. And I think, by the way, that's a big strength of Europe, that we can really ensure user privacy, and we can enforce that also on other companies that are coming into Europe. So this is an edge of AI companies starting here. Plus, and I think that's the second one, it's really about multilingual approaches. I think Aljoscha is more firm in that, but 2 of my companies, they are in NLP, and they are the only ones who can do it, because for Americans, for example, they speak English, and that's how they train their models. But at the end of the day, they don't want anybody influencing them. They want to be creative and build something that people buy, and that makes people
absolutely
happy.
So don't get me wrong. Don't start to think what would the politicians want. No, because then we are doomed in the end. So that's absolutely not how it should work on that.
Don't get me wrong. But maybe to end this a little bit, because we're running out of time. Since Christmas is coming up, I would love to take the opportunity for both of you to ask each other what you would wish from the other side to do. So the scientist asking the politician, and the politician asking the scientist, to make really the application of AI from a German perspective much, much better and faster. Who wants to start?
I could start. I mean, one thing I would really hope is that the state itself would start using AI for various purposes and telling people what experience they make, so that they are really a forerunner. So that we will say, oh yes, we have a cool state, and now the companies, they cannot stay behind. They have to be as cool. Yeah. So when you apply, when you do your text regulation and so on and so forth, I mean, then you could get a nice interface where you can put everything in, and you see the effects and so on. I mean, this would be really nice, and for many other things that are paper-based or fax-based still. That would be the one thing. And at the other hand, I mean, of course, you're in opposition, not in the current government, but it would be good for me also if we could a little bit monitor the long-term effects of our paper tiger, right? I mean, we will not see the effects tomorrow or the day after, but it would be good if you would call on us, I mean, on our expertise, I mean, regularly, so that we can monitor and can see if it's still, the recommendations are still good. Yeah, if some of them have been met and they need to be modified, I mean, this would be something, it would be good, I think, to have a little bit more long-term activity than what we could reach within 2 years.
Thank you. Mario.
So basically, it's really research communication. I think it was missing a bit, or not only talking to the politicians, but talking to the people. So you're the bridge in between. And so, I mean, there are minor people who don't believe in research anymore. But I think this triangular thing needs to work better, because you come without an agenda. And if you see what happened within the COVID crisis, so rather if you share the opinion, for example, of Mr. Droste or whatever, so what they brought up, how many people listen to the podcast and call us and say, yeah, but he said, and we need to become better in our argumentation. So I think this circle was a bit sleeping, and therefore scientists should communicate a bit more to ordinary people, and not only on conventions and stuff, because this really helps the politicians to hook into something which for voters comes without an agenda, because otherwise you're always the politicians. You want to do it for this and that region. So this would be my Christmas present, and a bottle of wine.
That's a lot to do. Great. Thanks so much. Thanks a lot, both of you. Mario, Aljoscha, that was really, really interesting. And I guess if we have more questions later on, they can just shoot you an email. Easy.
Sure. Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you so much. Please stick around. And everybody, we're not taking a break until 2 p.m. And then we continue with AI strategy. So hope to see you then again. Ciao.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.